So perhaps whilst we wait for Mr. Dea to tune in online, we could start with the presentations of the panelists who are physically here. Thank you for all who've traveled and made the journey, particularly from outside of Kenya. It's my distinct honor to introduce today's topic, which is the place, the role, and the contribution of civil society organizations in the construction of the rule of law and the building of democratic societies in East Africa. We shall grant each panelist about 10 minutes, and then we shall open the discussion to the plenary for questions, answers, and contributions. And we strongly encourage our delegates from outside of Kenya to share the East African experience with us, please. Okay. I'm told Mr. Dea is online. So I think just for ease of reference, we shall start with Ms. Fulgence Masewe, the Acting Executive Director of Legal and Human Rights Center. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, it's nice to be here, and it's good to come from Tanzania to share our experience. But for me to put things in perspective and for you to understand the place of civil societies in Tanzania in shaping democracy and rule of law, I should carry you to the background of Tanzanian politics and the governance system. Because if you don't get this background, you will be judged, will be stoned, and will be cast wherever we are going, and be accused we are not doing enough, like our counterpart in Kenya or some other places like Zimbabwe and so forth. Yeah, you know, in the wave of early 90s, we had the transition from single party to multi-party system. I know most of these countries, including Kenya, that's where we ushered in multi-party. But the only thing which we always confuse when we are talking about introduction of multi-party system in Tanzania, we are failing to appreciate whether Tanzania was a single-party system or authoritarian regime. For using the single-party system, it was the sake of democracy. But for sure, what we had in Tanzania is a party supremacy. And it was clearly preached everywhere. And the party supremacy means what? Party is everything. Party is civil society, party is army, party is intelligence, party is police, party is judiciary, party is everywhere. And in that particular time, for you to be enrolled even into the university, the ID which you are supposed to submit is ID of the party. For you to be employed, you must have the ID of the party. And at the workplace, you must belong to the party wing of that particular working place. So, I was looking at this ICJ 1959. So in Tanzania, there was no civil society, and it was not allowed. So it was not the question of single-party system, but there was no alternative voice in Tanzania. So civil society were not allowed. So whatever you see in Tanzania at that particular time, it was all about party wing. Trade union was a party wing. So the leadership, general secretary, they are nominated by the party. Women counterpart or civil society, the so-called, it was a party wing, UWT. Youth, the same. So everything was party. For those who even attempted at the beginning to register some civil society, they were deregistered because they said that they are carrying out political activities, which was banned in Tanzania. And you remember, we didn't have Bill of Rights in our constitution. So how can you talk about political freedom or civic space at that particular time while you don't have the Bill of Rights in your constitution? So even formulating in terms of the freedom to associate and to the associate, something cannot be preached about. And that's how we are governed. There was no private media. Anyway, there was no media, by the way. If you say there was no private media, it's as if there was a public media, because the public media was a media propaganda. It was radio and 2 newspapers only. There was no TV, there was nothing. So we are living in the total darkness. So the introduction of civil society in Tanzania, it came with the introduction of multi-party politics in 1992. So for you to break through in this entrenched system as a civil society, to be seen in advocating for democracy, human rights, always people, they see you as a treasoner, as if you are committing treason offense. If for some of you who knows our organization, Legal and Human Rights Center, Tito was working with us, is just left last year. We are seen as a very radical organization, but if I see at ourselves and look at the neighbors, I say we are doing nothing. Literally, we are doing nothing. Because we can issue public statement for whatever happened. We can go to court to challenge draconian law. They see us, how dare are you? People that are even calling you, are you the one who conducted that press statement? How can you do that? Because we were enclosed to the extent that speaking is like an offense. So come to the 1990s, it means with these civil societies which were formed post-multi-party system, they had a lot of work which is still going on. First of all is the legal awareness. Because previously, even the Constitution, you cannot see it. Where do we find the Constitution? Anyway, what the business do you have with the Constitution? The Constitution we can get is the one of CCM, of the party. It was nowhere. If we are seen with the Constitution, what kind of business do you want to overthrow the president? What do you want to do? What do you want to do with the Constitution? So even it was like, anyway, how many Catholics are here? I'm a Catholic. Catholics holding Bible. It was a no-go zone. We have those misales waumini. What do you call it? Sunday Missa. Yeah, with those digested books there. So they don't confuse you with going to the big book to read things which are contradicting themselves. So they've sweetened everything on. Similarly, in Tanzania, holding constitution is an offense. So if you are found with constitution, they think, what kind of person are you? What the business do you have against the government? Why are you reading constitution? So legal awareness and legal literacy, it was very low. And remember, the human rights was introduced in our constitution in 1984. And it was never implemented. It was suspended until 1988. And it was not enforced until 1992. So, you cannot separate civil society, legal awareness, legal advocacy, and so forth from the constitutional transformation which you are supposed to be seen. So the big work we've been doing is monitoring accountability, look at judicial functions, parliamentary function, holding government accountable, but advocating for legal reforms. Because what we did, we introduced multi-party because it was a requirement. But did we go back to make the room in order so that it can accommodate those reforms? We still have the party which is still powerful than the government itself. And in Tanzania, they say, zidumu fikra za mwenyekiti. I don't know how to put it. Whatever the chairperson thinks it's right. And who's the chairperson? Is the chairperson of CCM, the ruling party. So whatever he thinks, it is right. Whether it is wrong or not is none of your business. And people are expecting at least to see some kind of the free and fair election, while the ruling party itself never conducts the election. They never conduct the internal election, never. They nominate, they bring the name for endorsement. And when the endorsement comes, no one has ever objected because chairperson is right. How can you object the chairperson? So, Advocates for Legal Reforms, it has been our major work, and what has made us very popular because of nature of organization is the number of strategic litigation we've been filing both locally and regionally. We have explored a lot the area of African court and East African court, and in local court. In some extent, we have been successful, and in some extent, even where we lost the case, we have managed to raise some public discussion out there for people to understand what is happening and whether it's right or not. You can lose the case in court but win the mind of the people in terms of bringing awareness. But it comes with a price. Because we are using African court a lot and it is twisted in Tanzania, you go to the court at that particular time, 80% of the cases were coming from Tanzania. And like 90% of decisions rendered by the court were against the government of Tanzania. The best the government they could is to withdraw declaration at Article 34.6 so that you cannot go there anymore. So holding the government accountable and some reaction you are getting, that's how the government retaliate when they see civil society they are doing a lot. So even this, Tanzania, they cannot go into streets like in Kenya, just what they are doing. They know how to demonstrate online. And the most popular platform back then, it was Clubhouse. Clubhouse was blocked, you cannot visit, you cannot access it in Tanzania. With the recent uprising between Kenya and Uganda activists, the next victim, it was Twitter. Twitter cannot have access in Tanzania. Telegram similarly, and some other platforms. Tanzania, you cannot access them, just like in China and Iran. So that's how we operate. And thriving as a free society, it is difficult because of the restrictive. But we have been trying to make our voice heard and our presence to be seen, to make sure people are realizing their rights and democratic freedom.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Masewe, on the interventions in Tanzania, that even though there's a long way to go, there is legal awareness, legal literacy, monitoring and evaluation, advocacy, and regional litigation underway, which is encouraging. I would now like to call upon Ms. Patricia Joseph, the Program Manager at Katiba Institute, to share her perspectives, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this opportunity and for having us here at this Democracy Forum. It's indeed an honor and also timely. It's a timely conversation when we look at both our historical context and even what is happening now in the current events. Before maybe I go to the specifics of the CSO's role, is just to follow through from what we were discussing yesterday, especially in terms of the operational context in which CSOs are in the East African region. We see commonalities, we see some progress, we see some backsliding. And when we look at the constitution, as I pick from my brother from Tanzania, we have seen progressiveness of constitutions, but we've also seen attempts to change constitutions to consolidate power, and I think Uganda is the one that is a good example. We have also seen attempts to amend the constitution in Kenya previously through the Building Bridges initiative, and if that had gone through, it would have changed how our democratic system looks like in a negative way, and that's why also civil society were part of the process to challenge that attempt. Historically in Kenya, we see civil society participation post-independence, and especially during the 1990s when Kenya, after the hyper amendments that were done by the previous governments under the old constitution, that also undermined the civic space, undermined independence of the institutions. The 90s saw a liberalization of the Kenyan context, where we saw a call for return of multipartyism, and when that happened, the pluralism that came about, then that also saw more participation by CSOs. And also the continued push for reforms that gave birth to now the Constitution of Kenya. Civil society bodies were heavily involved in that processes, including even the Ufungamano initiatives, different civil society networks, civil society experts within the reform process. I mean, even for Katiba Institute, our founding also came about as a result of having a new constitution. And then the question was, we have a good constitution, how do we get it implemented? So that we come from a progressive text to creating a constitutional culture. And one of the founders was Yashpal Gai, who was one of the people who led the constitutional review process. I know we had many stages before it brought us here. And coming to today, where we are, we see progress in certain respects, like the regulatory frameworks. Uganda, for instance, it recognizes NGOs in the constitution, but we know that in practice, that is not what we are seeing. In Kenya, we have the Public Benefits Organization Act that was pending for a very long time. It was CSO's involvement that led to this law being enacted. And then for so many years, it stayed without being commenced. And then last year, the president gave the commencement declaration, and it came into force. But then now, later on last year, we saw, after the protests that took a lot of center stage in June last year, then some organizations were targeted. And of course, what did they do? They used the PBO Act to say, oh, you have not complied with the registration framework. And that case showed us what can really happen in terms of how regulations can be used against civil society. We have seen also in the region use of laws such as the anti-terrorism laws to curtail how civil societies operate. We have seen how laws on family protection are proposing measures that will curtail how civil societies will work. But the bulk work for us is the constitution remaining in place, because it is that place that gives us an opportunity to do the work we are doing. For Kenya, before we got the 2010 constitution, civil society's participation or influence in change was also limited by the requirement of legal standing, or what the lawyers like to call it locus standi. That if you are not affected by a human rights violation, it was difficult to go to court and to challenge violations on behalf of any group. But now with the 2010 constitution, we now can go to court to challenge any violations, either on behalf of ourselves, on behalf of the specific groups or individuals, on behalf of Kenyans at large. And this is now where I come in to say how we have used the Constitution of Kenya 2010 to really challenge unconstitutional conduct or failure to implement the constitution per the law, or any violations that occur along the way. And the one way we've been doing this strongly in the civil society movement, and this arose yesterday, is using public interest litigation and strategic litigation. We have challenged the government on many issues. I could highlight some based on the current events. We have challenged conduct of the police, on how police has been conducting itself during the protest. They are supposed to identify themselves. The courts have made declarations they should not be going through with unmarked cars or hiding in masks or hiding their identity. Positive declaration. Recently, the attempts to, and not just recently, media shutdowns. Last week, there was a declaration that media should not give live coverage. This has happened in the previous government. We have gone to court to challenge those declarations, and the courts have given positive decisions. Now the question is, even as we look at our operational context, is also the compliance. We have challenged, and this came out yesterday, about representation of women in appointive bodies or also during elective positions. The Constitution gives us a 2/3 gender rule, that at a minimum, any appointment should reflect at a minimum a third of one gender. And one thing that has not happened is implementation of that principle. We have seen a commitment by Parliament to realize that principle. But also what we have gone further to do is to go back to court and requesting, if Parliament, for instance, the Constitution is not compliant, then is the Parliament body constitutional? We've also questioned about the role of political parties to help us reach gender representation, that they should also be liable to that rule. Even appointments by the president, for instance, of the cabinet secretaries, there are current cases in court challenging non-compliance. But to go further, what we see now in the context of going to court, we have the position to do that, we have the space to do that, but now the question has been the compliance. There is compliance in some respect, but there's also now that culture of impunity, positive decisions not being implemented. Even at the regional level, through collaborations, we've challenged, for instance, the evictions of, for instance, the indigenous communities, such as the Ogieks, from their community land. That case has there's a good decision at the regional court, but even Kenya is yet to comply. We have challenged, even our partners have challenged issues of internet shutdowns. This happened last year in June, when people could not access internet after the June 25th protest. I think the CSOs also, I think I just have two other issues to provide. Besides promoting constitutional reforms, there is also the influencing policy and legal reforms. We see, especially happening when we have laws that are being enacted that are regressive, and Parliament in Kenya has been releasing many laws, and we've been playing catch up because of too much many laws that are not compliant. And even as of yesterday, there's a proposed laws that to regulate demonstrations. There are laws that to challenge security laws amendments, and we have gotten some good judgments from that. Of course, the participation of CSOs in our democracy has been also very strong in terms of oversight, and oversight has been happening either directly with CSOs doing the oversight, and this is especially more relevant today because the oversight institutions and our legal systems have not been working, or they have been captured. Therefore, the role of civil society comes in very strongly to support in the oversight. And also we see increasingly the idea of civilian oversight, where Kenyans themselves now have taken a more proactive role, seeing that Kenyans are now scrutinizing proposed laws in Parliament, scrutinizing budgets, scrutinizing service delivery, scrutinizing procurement processes. That civilian oversight, then the role of civil society also becomes more important to facilitate that civilian oversight by supporting them with both the skills, the tools. And also because of where we are in terms of the democratic backsliding, we find ourselves also providing a buffer for the citizens. Because there's now increasing cases of abductions, enforced disappearances, malicious prosecution of protesters or human rights defenders, extrajudicial killings. We find that people who are expressing dissent are increasingly facing threats of arrest, and civil society are giving that support with collaboration with, for instance, the Law Society of Kenya, and building solidarity, so that now when these protesters are taken to court, there are people following up. There are organizations supporting with the payment of bail. There are organizations like IMLU that have been doing the documentation. These organizations like us, Kenya Human Rights Commission, ICJ Kenya, going to court through public interest litigation to again offer that buffer against regression from the constitutional protections, and also challenging any human rights violations and also unconstitutional conduct by government agencies.
Thank you very much, Ms. Joseph. That was a succinct summary of the Kenyan experience, public interest litigation, legislative and policy lobbying, as well as regulatory audits. And the result is that Kenyans are now encouraged to participate more in governance and legal matters concerning the country. Thank you. So I shall now move to Ms. Sheila Muwanga from Uganda. She's with the Foundation of Human Rights Initiative, and she's going to share the Ugandan experience with us, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentine. Again, thank you to ICJ Kenya and the Partners Foundation for inviting us to reflect on democracy trends in our region, but also to pick up some good practices happening. For Uganda, I think it's not so much about what civil society organizations have done in terms of impacting on rule of law and democracy. I think for us it's a settled matter, Michael and Peter. Like there's been so much effort in changing the normative framework, practices, attitudes around rule of law and democracy. But I think the real question is, what today, what tactics can we use that are impactful on the political and the human rights terrain and the rule of law terrain? And for me, that's really my question. Like, what could work, to take us a step forward? If you look at the history of civil society in Uganda, the behavior of civil society in Uganda is very much informed by the different political contexts that we have sort of been through. If you look at the pre-independence, we had, for example, the women's movement, very vibrant in the 1940s, pushing on issues around the right to property through, associations like the Mothers Union, through associations like the Young Women Christian associations, those very Christian, very religious, faith-based organizations pre-independence, which is amazing, and they're still here today. But do we still define them as part of civil society? And for us, that is also the question, that have we sort of ring-fenced civil society to be only us who are registered with the NGO bureau, so who then it becomes or is civil society organizations? Because in Uganda, Mothers Union, Young Women associations were very active in terms of pushing for rule of law, in terms of pushing for participation at the time. Post-independence, we saw civic organizations coming up. Students, trade unions were very active in terms of pushing for respect for human rights, for rule of law. And post-independence, we also saw the emergence of our current president, for example. Students were very active at university and pushing for change, particularly also because Uganda was now going through turmoil, was going through a very bad governance with the Idi Amin and other presidents as well. So that was a very, very difficult times in terms of politics. So we saw the emergence. Faith-based organizations were very, very strong. For example, Bishop, we saw the murder of prominent religious leaders because of speaking out against government. So that is where we also saw faith-based organizations really speaking out against government as part of civil society. In the 1980s, post-independence, is when we saw the coming in of President Museveni, who has been here, I think, 40 years now since then. Yeah, and the president, for me, really is equated to, for ladies, if you've had that boyfriend who you loved so much that you don't even think that he would ever leave you, and then he leaves you, and you're like, hey, he pulls the carpet under you. Even for the men, if you've had that girlfriend, yeah, I'm sure you have, yes, Arnold. So, Arnold, you have. That girlfriend who you're like, will never leave you, has come to say, you know what, I'm going to change your world. Or you had a bad boyfriend, I am changing your world. And that was the message President Museveni brought for us, that fundamental change. And we all embraced the president. And I remember you were young, we're still young anyway now, but we were young and we went to vote and we were active in the elections and we mobilized for the president. Little did we know that we were mobilizing for somebody who was planning ahead of us, who was entrenching themselves. And the boyfriend pulled the carpet and the boyfriend has left us. If you listen to Stella Nyanzi, she said she loved President Museveni with all her heart, until he pulled the carpet. And so that's, and at that time we had, for example, like only 447 NGOs. By 2019, we had 14,000 because the framework was so open, for associating, for engagement. NGOs were all over the place. Now, today, we have about only 5,000 NGOs because the environment has become so restrictive. Like just registering an NGO, just operating as an NGO is so difficult. Like to imagine, like in our constitution, and one of our panelists has actually mentioned, to imagine that our constitution, in its principles of state policy, recognizes the importance of NGOs. And it says, and I'll read it verbatim, the state, civil society organizations shall retain their autonomy in pursuit of their declared objectives. Imagine. And to think that we cannot be that independent. And they say, the state shall guarantee and respect the independence of non-government organizations which protect and promote human rights. To imagine that is a principle of state policy. And what is happening now, that organizations are being infiltrated or are being closed. Very many cannot act independently because of state surveillance and hoverance. You will not imagine that this is the same constitution. We have a beautiful chapter 4. We have the Uganda Human Rights Commission, has beautiful powers, powers of court. They can summon anyone. But to think that the commission can now write a directive today and the president's son will respond and say, that is rubbish, and we shall not respond to the directive to release somebody who has been extrajudicially, arrested is saddening. Yeah, we have local standard, Article 50, like you mentioned. Anyone who feels like their rights have been violated or anyone's rights can go to court. Like we have a Human Rights Enforcement Act to pull down and say you can actually enforce your rights from the Constitution. So there's been beautiful normative framework, and it is still there. To think that we have beautiful freedom of expression, and to now worry and say, I can express myself over radio, but I don't know if my right to that freedom will be there after I have left that radio station, is something to really worry about. So, and that is the context that civil society organizations work in Uganda. And what have we done? There's been lots of work that has been done, even during the semblance of an open civic space. There's been lots of work done around policy advocacy, advocating for pro-poor policies. Organizations and NGOs were participating in the poverty alleviation policies in the Ministry of Finance, creating and advocating for gender-sensitive budgets within governments and ministries. There's been the passage of progressive laws prohibiting domestic violence, improving youth employment, fighting corruption, access to information, public order, anti-torture, like everything you can think about. Like there's been lots of laws, journalists media was vibrant at that time. I think we have over 200, Michael, you remind me, media, like radio stations, from just 1 to like 200, both online but also physical. And yes, 2 minutes, I'm almost done, And there was spontaneous demonstrations, judicial activism, and so on, and I could continue. Legal aid, humanitarian responses, lobbying for at the international community, at the international spaces has been there. But that has been done. Just give me like 5 minutes on and I'll be done. That has been done, and there's been progress. Today, with the increasing authoritarianism, where it's hard, where NGOs are being accused of money laundering, when you oppose constitutional amendments around lifting the presidential age limit, that has already been done. When you oppose lifting the presidential term limits, that has already been done. Organizations are stuck, have been taken to court and accused of big offenses like terrorism, money laundering, and stuck in court, with accounts being blocked, with organizations not able even to operate. There's been lots of pushback, but in terms of tactics for a place where impunity is its name, we have seen migration from tactics that we have used when space was open zeroing on down on very activist tactics. For example, we have one group that I wanted to mention here called the Jobless Brotherhood. Mike, I don't know if you remember that, and David. Jobless Brotherhood, what they've done in this context is they released pigs, yellow pigs, because yellow is the color of the ruling party. So they went to Parliament and released, I think, like 10 yellow pigs. Like Parliament is debating politics, debating anti-whatever. All of a sudden they see yellow pigs coming. And what were these pigs? The pigs were demonstrating the parliamentarians who are fattening themselves while you have these jobless students who have no jobs. So the pigs were really instrumental. Of course, we have heard about Stella Nyanzi and the whole discourse on the digital discourse. Stella Nyanzi had that hashtag, the buttocks, the pair of buttocks. And people were like, my God, this is so off. But man, it raised discussion around the efficacy of the Ministry of Education, the girl child, but also generally government. So there's been lots of work, even in terms of changing of tactics. Strategic litigation. Michael there is always in court, like challenging government on every issue. Yeah, people have challenge government around trial of civilians in court, habeas corpus, present them alive, like very difficult campaigns around the death penalty, around extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances. There's been effort to do that very quickly. There's been hashtags around release Bobby Wine and so on. I wanted to show the one campaign that was really instrumental. Brian, if you could just help me very quickly, and I'm sorry I'm going to stop. There was a real big campaign on potholes. And the digital space has really helped in terms of transforming tactics and getting leaders to here. If you see that campaign, so somebody was on, and they were drawing potholes in Kampala. To think that you had those potholes in Kampala, and people were showing how you could actually swim in some of those potholes. Just keep going. To think that you had, so that was a digital campaign, like they called it the pothole exhibition of Kampala. You see those people swimming. So to think that you had deep potholes in Kampala and people could swim. I mean, the president had to really comment on the potholes. And by now, there's been a lot of rehabilitation. So there's been lots of movements in terms of tactics to actually address the going political authoritarianism. But the question that we are asking, that people are asking us, and when I say us, it's mainly the traditional civil society organizations. How are we linking with these social movements that are emerging, spontaneously? Are we still relevant, in terms of our activism, for example? Are we too bureaucratic, for example? And does that bureaucracy then serve? Can it work in spontaneity? And that's a question that we are asking. So I will stop there for now. But I think for me the question really is, what tactics are we using to respond to impunity? What tactics are we using to respond to the growing authoritarian regime in Uganda? And does that are they working? Again, we're not losing hope in Uganda. I was speaking to my Ugandan colleagues this morning that it's a day at a time. If we're not speaking out, if we're not acting and going to court and challenging all this, maybe the tide would be different. Maybe the ship would be sinking. So if we continue to speak out, continue to do strategic litigation, we are pouring the water out of the boat, and the boat might have sunk, might be sinking if we don't do that. So whatever little that we do in whatever form, we are keeping the boat from sinking. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Stella. Thank you very much, Stella. It's interesting to hear how you've pointed out that the digital space is progressing the constitutional recognition of CSOs as pivotal social actors. Thank you. So we would now like to move to our fourth panelist, Mr. Don Dea from the Pan-African Lawyers Union, and he's tuning in from Tanzania online. Mr. Dea, are you online, please?
Yes, I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me.
Excellent. We'll give you your 10 minutes, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I apologize. I had logged on long before you started, and I was busy working in the background, and I did not know that you actually started. So I've missed some of what the panelists said. But I'll try and put this briefly. And to say that in the region, if you look at the larger Eastern African region, it is a very difficult time for East Africans and indeed for most of the rest of Africa and a good part of the world. Yet it is also a time of hope. Looking at the region, there's been outright war in Ethiopia, in South Sudan, ongoing even now, in Sudan itself, basically the Horn of Africa, and the Ethiopian war also draws in Eritrea. But there's also been outright war in the Great Lakes region, drawing in the Democratic Republic of Congo, with actions from Burundi, Rwanda, and to a less extent, Uganda. There's continuing terrorism in Somalia, and in the recent past, tensions between Ethiopia and Somalia concerning the semi-autonomous region of Somaliland. But as Sheila was demonstrating just now, even in those countries that are not at outright war, such as Djibouti, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, we're in a democratic crisis. The executive arms of government and the security sector have literally gone rogue, among other things, earning the mantra East African Community of Abductions. In most of these countries, the legislative arms of government have become neutered or compromised and are mostly mere voting machines for the executive and legitimizers of anything the executive does, any executive mischief, ranging from amending constitutions unlawfully and justifiably to enacting laws severely restricting civic space, mostly with the excuse of countering violent extremism. They seem to have forgotten, these legislative arms seem to have forgotten their role of oversight of government and also oversight of the security sector and also oversight of their foreign relations. They seem to have forgotten this completely. Again, in most of these countries, except from some islands of hope, the judicial arms of government have also become complicit in this democratic regression and in this literally looting and raping of citizens, from giving questionable decisions on matters of public law to using the twin tools of delay and proceduralism to effectively thwart justice. And if you just look at the example of Uganda, where recently, a couple of months ago, the Supreme Court gave what was hailed as a remarkable decision, trying to rein in misuse of the military and military costs to try civilians. On the one hand, yes, it is good jurisprudence. On the other hand, they took so long to give it that they literally gave the government free rein to do what it wanted, but then in the end, almost looked good. Again, when you look at our independent institutions, these are the national human rights institutions, national anti-corruption commissions, ombudsman offices, independent oversight authorities, with one or two exceptions, they also have totally lacked rising up to their mandate with sufficient robustness. So they do exist. They do speak from time to time. We do see them on TV or on social media, but no, our life does not change in any way. And many of them also are facing staffing and funding challenges. When you come to the regional institutions that should have consolidated and stabilized our polities, our economies, our societies, they are mostly staggering, poorly staffed, poorly funded, and mostly poorly led, totally lacking leadership. If you look at the African Union, the East African Community, the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region, IGAD, the International Intergovernmental Authority on Development. In terms of the economy, it's very remarkable. In most of the EAC countries and the larger Eastern Africa, we are seeing what we call jobless growth. The economies are actually growing, but this is not translating into a better quality of life for the people, especially the young people. We are also seeing corruption and conspicuous consumption by the elite that is approaching stratospheric levels. There seems to be no shame left amongst our elite. If you look at how, for instance, South Sudanese elite are looting from their country and investing in Kampala and in Nairobi, huge mansions and so on, which is where their spouses and children stay, while they kill other people's children in Juba and across the country. It's just total lack of shame. And then, of course, we also have, because of the huge debt levels that we have, inordinate policy control of our economies by the Bretton Woods institutions, such that our governments have very little money left to serve the people, especially to provide public goods, education, health, sufficient infrastructure, and so on. So it's not, in that sense, a happy picture. But the response of the citizenry has been remarkable, and this is what gives us a sense of hope. I know today you asked me and us to speak more about civil society, probably meaning civil society organizations, but I want to take a detour and first speak about the citizen. The most remarkable development of the last few years for me has been the rise of the autonomous citizen, as I call it, exercising her or his citizenship rights and duties in a leaderless, tribeless manner, I would even say institutionless manner, using a combination of the physical streets and the online streets. So this autonomous individual has transcended the CSOs as we know them. They are mostly young people, but they're not exclusively limited to young people. So we have individuals like Maria Sarungi Sehai, a Tanzanian who's in exile in Kenya. People like Stella Nyanzi, which Sheila also referred to, a Ugandan who's now mostly in exile out of her country, and many others who have garnered huge social media followings, an ability to whistleblow, an ability to get information or to investigate, and to have huge convenings on X and in other spaces. So this is a very strong development. We also see this autonomous individual utilizing the courts in a very dramatic manner. A good example is Okoitiom Tata in Kenya. So I think one trend to watch is this, and to see how should the citizen of the future be with this level of autonomy and this level of being able to be proactive, and then to mobilize online with fellow citizens and see what to do online and see what to do on the street. But the CSOs, as we know them, have also quite evolved over the last 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall. So we have what we call the NGO, but other forms, membership organizations such as ICJ Kenya and so on, which 30 years ago was a small group of people working mostly pro bono to do what they can. Of course, there have been changes in donor funding, spikes and lows, and we think donor funding as we know it is going to radically change. In fact, is in the middle of radically changing. So many organizations we think will actually fold and close up completely. And the more clever ones will find ways of transforming, either merging or changing the shape and form with which they operate. But we've also seen in the last few years a rise of something else that we had over 30 years ago that seemed to have really diminished. And that is the activist academic and the activist academic institutions. So you, for instance, see a lot of action around the Faculty of Law at Kabarak University, holding convenings, doing research, doing publications, partnering with lawyers associations at the national level, at the regional level, at the continental level. So that's a very positive trend. As Sheila has said, we've seen these CSOs, whether operating at the national, regional, or continental level, engaging in massive public education using a variety of ways, digital or otherwise. We've seen them engaging in mobilization of the public, in conferences, workshops, seminars, public forums, and online. We've seen them engaging in strategic litigation and getting more daring in the strategic litigation. So for instance, in places like Nairobi, the amount of economic litigation that's going on now on tax, on public-private procurement, partnerships and procurement, on esoteric areas, on climate, and the intersection of climate and law, and so on. So these are all, I think, things to be lauded. There's a sense in which this has kept us floating and has mitigated the worst that could happen to us, but it's certainly not enough, and at least not enough to rise to the challenges that we're facing, especially of a completely shameless national elite, but even a global elite. If you look at the likes of Trump, the likes of Musk, and so on. So our world is changing radically, and I think we have to continuously transform ourselves to change with it. And I'd really like to go back and finish with the issue of the office of the citizen. How do we get more proactive, more dynamic citizens working in a range of ways that actually cause transformative change? I think the seeds for it are there, but it's about how we harness it beyond what has been done today. Perhaps let me stop there and enable you, Madam Moderator, to democratize the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dea. We appreciate the panoramic perspective of the region and more specifically the charge to us as autonomous citizens to act and cause the change that we want to see as individuals. Thank you. I think I shall now hand back to Cheptum. We shall open it up to the plenary for contributions, questions, or answers. And you can target them at specific members of the panel, if you like. Thank you. Michael?
Thank you so much. My name is Michael. I want to thank the panelists. I have a question to Tanzania. First, I love Tanzania, but Tanzania confuses me. Tito, you'll be fine. You have the seat of the East African Community. You also host the East African Court of Justice. You also host the East African Community. But things are tough. What is it that would take Tanzania to be what we want it to be? Is it a people's revolution? I've had a conversation with the Tanzanians and they tell me socialism and Tanzania and may not cause that. What would it change? What would it take to bring Tanzania to what it's supposed to be? Maybe a radical question. If CMM left power today, would Tanzania be different? Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the wonderful panel. My name is Jorge Campos. I'm a Mexican citizen, but a student at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. So my question would like to go back to this question of tactics and civil society and what has emerged after recent decades. And of course, it's addressed to Sheila, but I would like also, if the panel has interest, to leave it open for the rest of the participants. And specifically, I was wondering if you could speak more about the tactics that the Christian right, American Christian right, has mobilized in order to have such a strong influence in a country like Uganda. Because even though that is a form of civil society that we perhaps may not have imagined when we thought that civil society was the way to go, it is nevertheless a historical form that we need to deal with. And it is, yeah, I was just wondering if you could speak more to their tactics and what can we learn, because you yourself raised the question of what tactics are we using, what tactics can we come up with. Perhaps it's the time to take them, and I mean the Christian right, take them as a serious example that we need to examine, because they have been successful at a planetary scale, starting from the US, where the recent victory of Trump was interpreted as a popular revolution, as a popular victory. So what could we learn from those tactics, us that are trying to rebuild democracy for our times? Thank you.
All right, thank you. My name is Jacob Emoit, an LLB finalist student at the University of Nairobi. And my question goes to any of the panelists, especially probably Patricia could answer this one. You mentioned that there's been positive pronouncement from the court, particularly on how police should conduct themselves during protests. Like they are not supposed to mask their faces. They are not supposed to go around with vehicles with no number plates. But the recent demonstrations have shown that they keep on disregarding some of these directives from the court. So clearly the pronouncements are not enough. So what can we do further to make sure that these court orders are actually obeyed? Is it time maybe we go for the police bosses, yeah, in the spirit of command responsibility? Thank you.
Okay, perhaps we can take one more question and then we'll have responses, and depending on the length of responses, then we'll refer to the second table close.
Thank you. Just wanted to value and appreciate the constitutions in your countries that allows you to have public interest cases. In our case in Sudan, it's not allowed at all. If you are not having personal interest in the case, you can't go to the Constitutional Court. And we are fighting and trying to convince women sometimes and the aggrieved people to come for litigation. And we had a very famous case in 2000 when the governor of Khartoum banned women from working in certain places. So we tried to bring women to complain or to go to the Constitutional Court. We managed to establish a very strong case, but you know, the authorities started to influence the women that to withdraw the case. So I started yesterday to think about the ethics, even not to do so. This is one thing. I just want to hear more about successful stories that about strategic litigation in your respective countries. So I want to hear more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think that question can be fielded by Mr. Masewe on petitioners and interested parties, and you could also probably tackle the first question. And then from there we'll move to Patricia and then to Sheila. And then if Mr. Dea is online, perhaps he can field the questions from the second table. Thank you.
Let me start with Madam Samia's question, if I got your name correctly. I got interest with your name from yesterday. Yes, for some obvious reasons. Yeah, my grandpa's name is Samia also. We don't use it because of stuff. Yeah. In 2020, in Tanzania, through Act number 3, we amended our Basic Rights and Duties Enforcement Act to bar public interest litigation in Tanzania, which was a clear violation of Article 26(2) of the Constitution. Litigants, Tito and the rest, they went to court to challenge that particular provision, the amendment. Because that provision requires for you to file the matter, you must have personal interest, and you are not allowed to sue the president, sue the Attorney General. President is the one who swears that I will abide by Constitution and respect Constitution. If he violates Constitution, he's going to sue someone else. At the High Court, we lost the case. At the Court of Appeal, in the recent decision, reversed the decision of the High Court. They say that the amendment which was done in 2020 was a clear violation of the Constitution. I think that is where we are coming from. We had a similar situation during Magufuli time, which has been reversed by the Court of Appeal. But that goes with Jacob's question again. We don't respect court decision. We have so many good decisions across all regional and the national courts, but they've never been respected. And even where the court, the government and the parliament, they've attempted to amend where there is an order to amend a particular law, they've made it worse than what it was before. It's like an overriding amendment that you say you are not allowed to do this, and then you have gone to court, you are successful, then you are given an order to amend that particular law or to repeal it, then we come with something which is worse than what you expected at the beginning. And in some cases, we created bad precedent. With Campos' question, when I was giving background of Tanzania, with no civil society organization, nothing, and the party supremacy and everything, the only outspoken group in Tanzania was the Tanzania Episcopal Council, which of Catholic priests and the bishops. They are the ones who were the thorn on Mwalimu Nyerere's time. You know what Mwalimu Nyerere did? he went and formed Islamic Council of Tanzania. He supported the Muslims to form there are so many small union of the Muslims, and he formed the one strong, the Muslim Council of Tanzania, which was there to counter the Catholics. So at the end of the day, it became the religious issue and not the national issue. So when the bishops comes out and talk about like what they are doing in Congo, even recently, they've been outspoken, and recently the Secretary General of Tech was attacked in public. They wanted to kill him, I think. They are the one who have been very outspoken, and they don't have sight. About Michael, can I tell you the funny thing about CCM? CCM was not registered even. When we introduced multi-party system, the Political Parties Act, it gave the special provision that they recognize the existence of CCM. So all other parties are registered, but CCM is never registered. And the CCM with the Soviet model which they've adopted, I think they are there to stay, because they own everything. So how can we bring it down? There must be a conflict within the party to contradict itself to the extent that it collapses from within. I don't know what is happening in America can be the same. I'm sorry to give such example. So when you grow so big and you reach to the extent that you contradict yourself from within, that's the only thing which can bring CCM down. But CCM has benefited a lot from intelligence services, has benefited a lot from police and the state apparatus in protecting itself. So whenever you hear anything good in Tanzania, it must be associated first with the president, second with the party, and not about the taxpayers and not about the government. So it's the CCM which delivers. So for us, CCM, Tanzania is seen as a peaceful country. I don't know if the details are hidden in Kiswahili. I don't know. We are not talking. Very few people know much about what happened in Tanzania. Like there was a time we talk about Magufuli. In some places, and people were confused. Which Magufuli are you talking about? Because they used to adore him like Thomas Sankara of the new era and so forth. But is there someone who was in disregard of constitution? He didn't care about anything. And Nyerere became very good president after the retirement. All good things we are hearing about Nyerere, there are things which were happening after his retirement. And there are so many people say in Tanzania, whenever they retire, they become wise. You remember the public lecture which given by Tundu Lissu in Makerere University? Go and listen to it. That's the purely Nyerere. So the Nyerere legacy is still living within us. And where was the one who built the system that kings does no wrong. Zidumu fikra za mwenyekiti. Yani whatever chairperson says, it is right, and no one can contradict it, or no one can challenge it. So that's you've been living. So it will take some time. Hopefully, we know nature can take place for human beings, but for the party itself to collapse, it must come from within. Because CCM it's large to the extent it even infiltrates the opposition. So you see some conflict within the opposition. They've been sponsored by the ruling party to make sure that if we are strong in this election, you won't see the next election as strong as you were in the previous election, so long as you are the opposition.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Masewe. We shall now move to Ms. Joseph regarding the query on enforcement of court orders. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think the idea of seeing non-compliance with court orders is also a manifestation of the culture of impunity, not just even with the police. There have also previous regimes that have not obeyed certain court orders. But to give an example now with the police conduct, we are also thinking of how then do we get public officials to be more accountable, because the main challenge even with what is happening in our country and the region is lack of accountability for unlawful actions or human rights violations. In Kenya, there has been recent progress towards getting leaders, the heads of, for instance, police institutions to be held liable for actions of their police officers. And there's a recent judgment to that effect where the court said that the Inspector General of Police could be held liable, personally liable, for unlawful actions of police officers under his command. And that is now a principle that we hope to see it being actively applied. When enforced disappearances also happen and court issues summons to the Inspector General, it is also in that regard that we can't expect a public or a head of the police service to come and say we do not have this person in custody when there's evidence that those people went to a person's house and took items, and that's when the person disappeared. It's not even enough for police to come and say, like we saw with the DCI, the Director of Criminal Investigation, saying that they do not have a missing person in custody. That is an abrogation of duty, because it shows that the duty is not only to investigate but also to provide protection. So denial of knowing a person's whereabouts does not remove that responsibility. And then thirdly, there's also the idea of holding people personally liable for their actions, like police officers, even in their individual capacity, cannot hide under the police surveys. I was enforcing orders from above. You have no duty to implement unlawful orders. And recently, even yesterday, when the CS for Interior made those remarks about telling police if anyone approaches a police station, you can shoot. The public outcry was on the one hand. Even now, there's a court case in court that now seeks to cite him for those remarks. Why? Because it's an unconstitutional action. It violates the rights. And then also, one of the things it's also asking is that he formally retracts at his own cost. That is now a personal cost to their actions. Even the case that said that the Inspector General of Police could be held liable, at the end of that case, the court said that the Inspector General bears the personal costs of the suit. So that now people stop hiding about that. If the courts award damages and taxpayers still pay those damages, then there is no accountability. But now introducing the personal cost might actually see something. And we saw it even with the order of the statement made by the CS for Interior. Some police officers came out to say, you will not defend us. We know that when push comes to shove, the person who shot is the one who is going to be in court, because there's that realization of a personal cost for unlawful actions. And then maybe just an addition to the questions of the tactics and strategies, maybe I just have a small voice to add to that. I think we are looking at the idea of how to build democratic resilience in the wave of all these regressions of either the country level, regional level, and then of course now the global factors. We see it in Kenya as well, about the influences of the rights movement. Why? Because Kenya has also, a section of lawmakers led by Kaluma has been leading this conversation about introducing a family protection bill. There is obviously support. Those influences, as we saw in Uganda, are also here. Kenya hosted a family symposium, I think a month ago, and we saw after that how people were targeting, making certain remarks about the work supporting the rights of sexual minorities, for instance. So we see that people saying it's not an African culture and all that, but the Constitution protects everybody. So the presence of those tactics are there. And those, even the rights movement influences are there in Kenya, because we've seen a section of leaders making public sentiments. I remember when Donald Trump made a comment about what is gender, saying it's just male and female. Even the president of Kenya made a remark to say, yeah, we do agree. But also, our law has also said the intersex should be protected as a group. So you see the president not even seeing what the Kenyan law says is really quite sad. And when it comes to the strategies, I think our work then in terms of the civil society is also to having foresight about what's coming. And sometimes you can see this. Before even, for instance, before we went to the amendment of the constitution attempts previously, you could see if there's a handshake, you could see how this handshake will be implemented, because it comes with ideas of wanting to divide power between the ruling party and the so-called opposition. I think our tactics will shift to the point of now maybe leveraging on the idea of the grassroots movement who have been doing the work from the word go. Even our work at the national level, we are not divorced from the lived realities of grassroots movement who influence how also we work. And the idea of, for us, for me, it's a moment that we have now with the young people and individuals harnessing that opportunity of not maybe engineering what is there, all those organic movements, but harnessing where we have the point of convergence. I think also in Kenya, CSOs work with a model of sometimes there's collaboration with state actors, sometimes you just can't collaborate. I think there has to be consequences of where government agencies want to benefit from CSO collaborations, but they also do not want to meet the end of the bargain. I think we have to introduce a cost to that from this other side of the people from where we stand. I think now the idea of now the rights movement, I think civil society in Kenya can see, and we can also see what it will mean for the work of CSOs. It actually, if there's a family protection bill, if you look at what is available in the public space, there are limitations that will come from that will create closure of civic space, targeting of individuals, and even the work of civil society and donors, because it also makes propositions about money that is foreign funding that supports certain interventions. And seeing that, we can also look at it broadly in terms of what does protecting our space in terms of building resilience look like. It's also looking at those influences of movements that actually have negative impacts on our democratic space. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response, Ms. Joseph. So now we shall move to Jorge's query about the stronghold of certain religious organizations in Uganda. And then I think we're running into the tea break, so we'll have one more contribution from the lady at the second table, and then I think Antoinette, just 1 minute each, and then I think we shall break for tea shortly thereafter. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Valentine. I think that she mentioned it, the Christian right, the strong grassroots, the entrenchment at the grassroots level. I think I find that really powerful, and very organic movements at the grassroots level with organic structures. That has really empowered the Christian right to continue to work from that perspective. And the voluntarism is amazing, yeah? Many times we, the structured NGOs, are very much accused, of following the money, being business-minded and so on and so forth. The voluntarism within these structures is also something to look at. I know that there's been backing also with very strong movements outside Uganda with lots of money, but the organic Christian right has very voluntary spirit that we need to also continue to learn from. I think the value clarification across the board, the Christian right is value clarified. It's human right, if it's human, and sometimes unlike the human rights movement. The human rights movement is not homogeneous. There are certain human rights that are actually not human rights. No, that one is not a human right. The Christian right is clarified on the value system, on their values and value system. How clarified are we in our value system? The consistency, I think it's something to also pick up on with the Christian right. The question, Samia, on locus standi, Article 50, that article is a very beautiful article because it allows anyone to approach court. But, Michael, it assumes a certain ecosystem that even as you go to court, Sheila, I probably not able to go to court. I need a lawyer. I need a Michael to interpret my case, to file my case. I need some money to give to Michael, to pay Michael. So that locus standi assumes that the citizen is able financially, but is able to afford the lawyer, or that you have a legal aid policy in place which will support and provide legal assistance to anyone who needs that. So In the absence of elements of an ecosystem that would, this article might not thrive or stand alone, you know, if there are elements in the ecosystem that are not actually working. The same thing with strategic litigation, very beautiful. And many people, and Dawn has alluded to that, many lawyers, organizations have taken public interest cases to court, and with telling results. But that provision also assumes a certain ecosystem where you have a judiciary that is activist, understands the human rights issues, but also you have a judiciary not bogged down by financial resources, limitations. Yeah, you have a judiciary that is going to be expedient and fast. We've seen cases in Uganda where cases of torture have been taken to court, and they spend in court 5-6 years, and by the time the ruling is made or delivered, the torture victims have died. That there is compensation, but to who now? The victims have passed on because of the torture. So they are very good provisions. We've had very good judgments, but they assume a certain ecosystem. They assume that the post-court work will not be impossible, that the rulings will be enforceable. But the enforcement is so tough, it's so expensive for an ordinary person sometimes, and even for NGOs like us. Yeah, you have a donor giving you money for 1 year, 2 years for strategic litigation. After that, the case still is going on. You have no money. You have to return the money. USAID has said stop work order. What happened? So there are all those challenges also, regardless. But yeah, it's a good tool. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheila. I wish we had more time, but we'll see tomorrow. I would like my colleague okay, you've got a microphone. And then I think your query shall be addressed by Don Dare, who's online, and he shall have the parting shot. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Anne from the Election Observation Group, ELOG. Don can answer this, and also maybe Masewe can chip in. When Mama called us Watundu na wakosa nidhamu, it wasn't so good coming from this side, because the history of Tanzania has been a history of safe refuge for the African continent. And we can see what was happening in the apartheid regime in South Africa, and how Mwalimu Nyerere was able to give safe passage. I didn't hear any of you speak about the Warioba Commission and the things that were spoken about, the progressive of the Constitution and how it was supposed to change. Quite a number of good things that were proposed in that commission. Not seen anything come to light. Is it a good time maybe to reflect, or also to re-speak about what was spoken in the Warioba Commission?
Okay, is Don online, Mr. Dare?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Just a few quick things, and to start with what Anne has just said, to emphasize whether it's the Warioba Commission or whether it's other work done by civil society, that Tanzanians, and many Tanzanians, are fighting very hard to try and transform their country. That many times is lost on the rest of us in the continent, mostly because they conduct the majority of their affairs in Swahili. And like for us Kenyans, even though we did 8 years of compulsory Swahili in school, we usually can't stand more than 3 minutes of Swahili or read more than a page of Swahili. So there's a lot that we're missing. Maria Sarungi Sahai has a Thursday evening X debate, and sometimes there are up to 10,000 Tanzanians. And they speak very robustly about what the change they want for their country. So let's continue offering each other solidarity. And that also comes to the question asked by the Sudanese sister, that how do we help countries where the rule of law system doesn't work, or where it has been completely manipulated and operationalized against the citizen? I think there's a great role for leveraging solidarity, regional solidarity, continental solidarity, international solidarity. And where our colleagues can't speak within their own country, we provide for them platforms where they can speak outside their country. The Banjul Forum, the NGO Forum, and the NGO activity around the African Commission on Human and People's Rights has been a great site for solidarity. At the very least, you listen to your colleagues, you hear what they're going through, and you hear the advice or the recommendations on what to be done. And then we take these many times to the special mechanisms, the various country rapporteurs, special rapporteurs, and so on, both in Banjul and in Geneva. In country, and Nairobi has been very good for this, for our Sudanese colleagues, for our Ethiopian colleagues, holding events, art, music, dance events, poetry, spoken word, where Sudanese, Ethiopian artists, and so on, who are in exile in Kenya can actually speak to us. Candlelighting ceremonies to let them know that we're thinking of them. PALU was part of setting up Africans for the Horn of Africa, an initiative that has a number of continental level Pan-Africanist organizations purely for this. I think that's very important. On the question that the Kenyan gent who spoke first asked that what would it take to get Tanzania to lead? The Tanzanian leadership that we currently have, and I think Fulgens has made this point over and over again, is incorrigibly unable to provide ideational leadership or moral leadership to the continent at the moment. They are not able to. Neither is Kenya, for instance, the apex political leadership in Kenya, neither is Uganda, and so on. So it is a very difficult time where we don't have iconic leaders of the ilk and of the stature of not just the Kwame Nkrumahs and so on, the Nyereres and so on, or the Thabo Mbekis and so on, or the Obasanjos and so on, who made us move from the OAU to the AU and dragged us in kicking and screaming. We rarely have that kind of apex political leadership now. So let's look for our own heroes. Let's look for ideational leadership, moral leadership elsewhere. Our Brian Kagoros, our Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's, our Femi Kutis, and so on, and let us water our own continental and international solidarity movements with them as our icons. The question on the American right, the American Christian right, the American Christian right have used a lot of money. It is just bribery, what they're doing to these MPs, one per country, in Uganda, in Kenya, in Botswana, in Namibia, and so on. It's money. It's money and business class tickets and visas to go to the US and a lot of research support and so on. But we don't have to counter money with more money, especially not corrupt money. We cannot outmatch corrupt money right now. But there are things we could do. We should expose them, expose those Christian right movements, expose the leaders that are championing this and so on. And then also learn from our own Gen Z. One of the things that I really liked about the Kenyan Gen Z last year when they were protesting, when they were prosecuting their movement, is that they reached out to their heroes. They reached out to the celebrities and they were demanding, they're saying, we are on the street, we've been giving you money. We are on the street, where are you? We want to see your statement on your social media. We want to see you on the street with us, and we want you to donate to our causes. So we actually inverted, the order where it is not us begging the donor, but it's the citizens demanding that you must put money in the things we consider important. And I think if we followed now Kenyan, African celebrities and African high net worth individuals with that mindset, with that posture, then we'll be able to fund a lot more of our own struggles and not just rely on our colleagues from the global north. My final point will be on the question Jacob asked around the police and security sector misbehavior. And I would like us to be very audacious on this. It is not normal what we're being put through. It is completely abnormal. And we must react to it with very, very audacious moves. I think countries like Kenya have now moved to the stage where we should more systematically deploy calculated civil disobedience. If the police are blatantly breaking the law, why should we listen to them? Why should we be party to it? So I think we need to do things like revisit the architectures of our homes and of our offices to be able to lock people in when they come in an unlawful manner. You don't fight them, but you lock them in and you say you must identify yourself. You must follow the constitutional provision that you show us your ID And then you must identify whether you have a search warrant, an arrest warrant, and you must tell the person that you want to arrest in a language that we understand, why they're being arrested, and say exactly where they're being taken. Citizens are doing it. Even in Tanzania, we've seen citizens surrounding a car and completely stopping an arrest that was unlawful. We saw the city hopper that tried to block the road outside Chaka Road to try and stop Maria Sarungi Sehai from being unlawfully abducted. I think we should do more of this, and we make it known to the police and to the government that until you reform, this is what we'll be doing. I think we should look at filming crime more robustly. Can we take drones to protests? And can we notify the police that we'll be on the streets and we will have our drone with us so that it is known? Can we use the satellite? And can we go further to individualize the cost of non-compliance, both to the senior officers under command responsibility and with the foot soldiers that we can identify, as Patricia said earlier? I really like, for instance, last week, the fact that one Kenyan lawyer has now taken the deputy president and also the cabinet secretary for the interior, both of whom are lawyers, to the advocacy disciplinary committee for statements that have made that are inciting the breaking of the law, yet they are officers of court by dint of being admitted to the bar. We need many more actions like this, not just in the regular courts, but in any tribunal or any body that should be useful. The ombudsman has been largely quiet in the events of the last 1 month. Why? What can be taken there? The National Cohesion and Integration Commission. How do we go under ethics provisions for certain public officers to be declared ineligible to hold public office for not meeting the Chapter 6 requirements, despite the challenge that we got from the Supreme Court? So I think, and also for the lawyers, I think it is now time to incite the courts to develop the exclusionary rule. The legal principle that evidence obtained illegally or through unlawful actions by law enforcement be declared inadmissible in court. If we consistently challenge our courts to throw out cases that have been brought about due to unlawful action, and also to hold these officers of the DPP who signed shady charge sheets, hold them personally accountable, increase the cost of non-compliance, we'll get very far. And I end with a challenge to the ICJ Kenya members. You have outsourced your agency to do things too much to the council and the secretariat. We are a membership body of lawyers who took membership because we are passionate about the rule of law and human rights. So let each of us take a case and run it, whether from our law firm, whether you are an in-house counsel, whether you are where. The work is a lot, but if more of us are doing it, like that young lawyer who's taken just a single case of me, I'll do one case at the Advocacy Disciplinary Committee. Even just more robust use of the court and legal processes and challenging Parliament may move us forward. So the challenge is on each and every one of us. Each one take one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dea. That's a good note on, but I'm told there's just one more contribution within 1 minute.
Awesome.
And then we shall take a recess for tea.
Okay, my name is Job Mwangi, the Advocacy and Litigation Manager at the Green Belt Movement. My question is directly to Patricia. They are our allies, especially in litigation. And I know one of the hardest things we've had is that majority of these organizations that are handling litigation in bulk, we've developed a lot of litigation fatigue because we are really spread. Our organization majorly deals with conservation. So any violation of human rights that touch on conservation, we're always in court. So as we speak, we have more than 15 suits. So because of this regime, they've learned that nothing is happening. So they've decided to actually budget for litigation. And in the process, what we've seen is that we're having budgeted corruption. Majority of these big wig law firms are actually surviving because of CSOs suing. So as much as that we are trying to tame the government, we've also opened up a market, like a shop, for these big wigs to survive. So I'd like to understand from you, what do you think we need to do going forward? Because yes, out here people feel like you're really working hard, we are being in court, but you're also perpetrating corruption in a big way. Secondly, I also want to understand how else can we really actively engage the citizens? Because I feel that as much as we are winning in court, if these people are not really connected to the goal and what you are doing, then it's all in vain. And finally, is it time that the CSOs really thought deeply about how we can deeply collaborate? Because the last 2 days, I've realized that all of us, if at all unite and give all our energies, then we can achieve more. Asante.
Thank you. Some of them are hard questions. But let me begin backwards on the idea of collaboration, which might also help us to answer even the initial question. Yes, we are definitely collaborating, because already even some of the cases we actually work directly together with like partners from like Greenbelt. And I feel you when you say about the fatigue. In fact, yesterday I think I was having a similar discussion with someone that we are almost being fatigued to suppression, to the point where you can't keep up, you can't respond to everything, even not only with cases, but even what is coming out from Parliament. We are here to even look at what is coming from counties. Even the idea of the consistent and compliance, it could be a strategy to fatigue us to suppression. So part of it is what Njeri was reminding us yesterday, that we really have to keep going on. And we are not at a point of, for me, I'm looking at the hope, because the opportunities are also there. We learn from our predecessors, the Njeris. Even what Don is saying, there is so much opportunity from even the young people and the citizen. Now, coming to now the idea even of the suppression, we, even as your experts in the environment, and we do a lot in strategic litigation, we are working with different networks. For instance, all the cases that we are doing on police accountability, it's not just Katiba or Kenya Human Rights Commission or IMLU. There's a whole group of the police reforms working group. There's a day we filed 2 petitions in a day. You can imagine the back work, the back end work that was happening. Someone was even joking that people must not be sleeping. And yes, people must not be sleeping. We can't get tired of doing what we need to do. So even it's an issue of even having hope that because we have won and we have seen the strides we are making with what we have, then we stay on that. Yes, and that you've asked a very good question about, and then even the idea of the individual citizens. Look at the Adani case in Kenya, for instance. A whistleblower gave information to a Kenyan who is outside the country. And that information, we started tracking it very early, because we don't have a whistleblower's law. But when it became a public discourse, to the point where there's a motion in Parliament, in Senate, then already there's a public record, a reliable public record of that. Then out of that, there's a petition in court. So the citizen is doing what he did out there. He faced multiple lawsuits. I'm sure if he was in Kenya, the risk would have been higher. But now, other players coming on board to file that case now in court. The same way we are going to with an environmental cases. And I know we are in court and then we see they are still cutting trees in the forest, and it's quite heartbreaking, but now we have to keep on making noise. And I think here is when you say we work with people on the ground, it's people who take walks, for instance, to Karura, who will come and say they are actually cutting trees. You may be in the office or in court because of the workload, but you're connecting with the people on the ground. People who live in the farms outside Nairobi, they are telling you this forest is being invaded. And we've seen this active citizens building up into now the national level litigation. Now coming to the idea of the budgeted corruption. And this is where we keep seeing the accountability. Yes, we sue the state, and then there'll be damages, for instance, and then, of course, the state will be told to pay, but that is also a cost coming from the taxpayers. So it's like we are paying for sins being committed. It's almost defeatist when you think about it, but no, we are not defeated. I'll take it back to also the idea of the institutionalizing personal liability and personal accountability. If a violation is because of somebody just disregarded the law, then they should not just benefit from that. When you talk about also the role of other players, there's that idea of corporate liability. I think even LSK, for instance, would be having its own conversations about lawyers who are perpetuating these things. It's also in the same arena that even some members of the Law Society have proposed, can we have people disbarred from being members because they no longer represent the ideals of the professional body. So if there's a corporate liability arising from also that kind of representation, then I think certain questions need to be asked, because I know what it means. And these questions have been also asked in terms of when government agencies who have the office of the Attorney General too, and the many advocates behind that office to defend suits against the government, why are we also doing this crazy expenditure by also hiring private law firms? I think that question needs to be asked, because why do we have government lawyers who are actually also not in court to represent the government legitimately, or maybe because there's already a suit in court? So there is that. Then finally, on collaboration, I think we will continue diversifying the collaboration. One, when there's a democratic threat to individuals, then we thrive in numbers. That's why you'll find that PIL is not just green belt, but there are so many other people behind you. They say, or we find there are so many petitioners, could be CSOs or other interested parties. That's part of movement. And I think we can also crystallize on the movement building that's already having the individual citizens, as well as now the grassroots movement. For instance, I know Mathare's Social Justice Centers has cases in court. It's a grassroots-led case in court, so that it's not one person who is doing it, and we just say we shall not be silenced by exhaustion. I think, and then I think the thing we've been saying also in the sector, when we think about the civil society movement, even the well-being is a conversation about resilience, the well-being of people who are in the movement, so that we don't exhaust Greenbelt because of too many cases, but also have us as support mechanisms. And I think different networks in the civil society sector are leading even certain conversations about well-being. Thank you. I hope I have attempted.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And the resounding gong is that we have to act as individuals and not just rely on the CSOs. There's so much to digest and process, and hopefully we'll have another plenary either this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon if there's time, so we can hear more contributions from around the region. So I'm going to hand over to Cheptum before we take a break. Thank you.
Another round of applause. Thank you so much to our panelists. I think we can have a photo with the panel before they leave.